Do you think software-in-the-loop testing is still irrelevant for suppliers? Think again. In this episode of dSPACE Forward, my colleague Erik and we will discuss about how the market is changing for software-defined vehicles, what the challenges are, especially for suppliers when it comes to software-in-the-loop testing, and how we can overcome these challenges together. Hi, and welcome to another episode of dSPACE Forward. I'm Janek, I'm leading the team of Customer Success Management at dSPACE.
And I'm Erik, I'm working as a business developer for the topics of software-in-the-loop testing and automotive cybersecurity in the regions of China and India.
Yes, so today we want to talk with you about software-in-the-loop testing and also why does it matter for suppliers, tier 1 suppliers, tier 2 suppliers. So Erik, basically everybody's now talking about software-in-the-loop as a measure to become more efficient also in the scope of SDV. What do you think are the reasons that it's also becoming more relevant for the suppliers itself?
So basically one term that you already mentioned was the topic about software-defined vehicle. So with more software inside the vehicle, there are more software that has to be tested inside the vehicle, and also the ECUs, so the electronic control units, has to be tested in a different type of matter. On the one hand, it matters to the supplier itself because the state of art and the way of what has to be tested and how they test it is shifting a little bit. And also one additional motivation comes from the OEM that would like to consider putting everything into one system and has to develop such kind of software-in-the-loop testing then also for these software-defined vehicle systems.
Yes, two very important points. Let's start with the first one a little bit. I think this is one of the main reasons why more people are talking about software-in-the-loop itself. We have a shift to software-focused functions, software becoming more complex, OEMs and tiers becoming more software developers, so more software testing becomes a thing. I think you can narrow this down to pretty concrete examples that, for example, the turnaround cycles, meaning the development of new features, software integration, software test, hardware tests, they shall become faster to develop software faster, to fix errors faster. And I think this is putting a pretty high pressure on tier 1 suppliers if the only thing they are testing on is hardware in the loop. We actually had one example that we might think about here. A few months ago, we had a tier who was exactly in that time pressure regarding testing, providing the next results for the next integration step. And this supplier, we were approaching this supplier to say, hey, why don't you do more software in the loop? Of course, there were some talks about, isn't this very expensive to do it in the first place? Isn't it much initial effort? And we told them, well, I think we can provide it for you in 3 weeks. And together with the suppliers and, of course, experts from our side, they had software in the loop running in 3 weeks and were pretty quickly able to test faster.
You can extend a little bit about the benefits that you get out of this, because from shifting everything that has already been in place on the hardware-in-the-loop testing towards a completely new system on test in the software-in-the-loop environment, what does it mean for the supplier and what was the benefits that they get out of this?
Yeah. So, well, some obvious things are, of course, they were able to test faster, they were able to test results faster. And, of course, testing in software in the loop is cheaper. So faster and cheaper are the obvious reasons here. There are also other benefits. For example, free up capacity from the hardware systems. And also, since we as dSPACE provide hardware in the loop and software in the loop, we are making sure that the switch to software in the loop is happening pretty quick. Because you not only need the simulation, you not only need the virtual ECU, you need some tests that you can run on. And we pretty quickly were able to execute, for example, 50% of the tests in software in the loop. Some have to be tested on hardware in the loop. Some tests might have hardware dependencies in the way how they test, but at least in this case, a front loading of roughly 50% was quickly able. And I think other reasons like cybersecurity, you know more about that, Erik, than I.
Yes, and I think that is one additional point that we would like to highlight here at dSPACE, that it's not about what do we test on hardware in the loop testing and what do we do on the software in the loop testing, but rather to combine these both types of securing these ECU tests, etc. Because anything that you might develop even in a further state, in a very much earlier state when it comes to software in the loop testing, you might also be beneficial when you can reuse this in a very late aspect when you have to validate, etc., something on a hardware in the loop setup then afterwards.
And I think these can be very intrinsic motivations for the supplier itself to do more software in the loop testing. But there are also other factors, right? Like, for example, more and more OEMs requesting a virtual ECU, right, Erik?
Yeah, exactly. And it's not about rather small OEMs that are trying to shift left on this very stage of the validation process, but it's rather complicated when it comes to really big and complex vehicle systems that they would like to completely simulate in a way that to have such kind of vehicle system rather being the content only having virtual artifacts inside it and running and duplicating it as well as having it in a real manner. So when we're talking about this, you might have heard about the partnership that we have together with Stellantis, where we are providing a simulation platform where we enable Stellantis to create and also to validate all their electronic control units in a virtual manner, where they can start testing those kind of application software, etc., up to 1 year before the hardware would even be available.
Yes. And I think for them, you already said the right keyword, it's about vehicle systems. So what we currently see is that OEMs, they want to shift complete effect chains to software testing, mainly because they are moving to zonal architectures. You have more interaction between the different ECUs, and therefore you have to do more effect chain testing. Therefore, you want to front load that as well. And I think this is one or the crucial factor why OEMs are currently requesting virtual ECUs, like Stellantis, for example, does. And we know that other OEMs are doing this at the moment as well. What do you think are the main challenges that arrive in these collaborations, OEM requesting virtual ECUs?
So basically, when the OEM has a plan and has this own motivation to say, okay, I would like to front load my whole validation strategy also to a virtual environment, then they have to say also to the suppliers, to the tier ones that we are referring to today, that to say, okay, dear tier one supplier, I would like to have this in a virtual artifact. I would like to have a virtual ECU from you. I would like to have all the software and all the application software running in it, just like it would be in the real ECU, already running in this virtual ECU. And there are, from time to time, we see many tier ones that are doing a great job when dealing with those kind of virtualization parts. But overall, also, there are some tier ones and suppliers that have a little bit of problems because they were starting to get in touch with software in the loop topics. They have the demand, okay, there are multiple tool chains, not only from one vendor. How do we proceed with this? How do we get the right things to my dear OEM that were requesting this? So we have to tell them that it's not only about one OEM at a time that will request such ECUs, but there are multiple OEMs coming to one supplier at one time in parallel, and they have different types of requirements.
Yeah. And exactly this is also the reason why we currently see this not just as a thing that can work out of the box, just like taking our tools or other tools, create the virtual ECU, and that's it. I think the two main challenges that we currently see is, first of all, as you said, OEMs are requesting ECUs with a complete software in it. Application software and also basic software that contains the middleware, which is, of course, one big part of SDV. In expert terms, you would say they are requesting a level 3 virtual ECU. Exactly for that reason, they want to test communication as well. And we see that this imposes challenges to the people because you still have a lot of hardware dependencies in it. Although you have AUTOSAR in place, not everything is abstracted by the complete microcontroller abstraction layer, for example. And this is for one thing that we, for example, do with our customer success managers. We are approaching people together. We discuss about what is the best virtualization approach for you to get to the virtual ECU. But of course, especially for suppliers, they are having the challenge some might request a virtual ECU for dSPACE systems, some might request virtual ECU for other systems, which is another big challenge. But I think, Erik, there's already a solution inside, right?
Yes, I think so. When it comes to the standardization of those kind of processes, etc., we at dSPACE are one of the leading companies who are driving for this so-called FMI layered standard bus. So whenever there's some kind of creation of this kind of ECU in a virtual artifact, we have a standardization now that many of these companies like dSPACE, for example, are working for it. So whenever there is a request for a virtual artifact from an OEM coming to a supplier, we are having a standard that out of our toolchain you will get a standardized format in which the virtual artifact will be then delivered that can be inserted and included in nearly every toolchain when it comes to software in the loop topic.
Yeah, and I think this is pretty crucial at the moment. I heard in the past of some suppliers who said, I'm only using software in the loop when the OEM requests it, because I have to use multiple tool chains if I want to do it in a productive manner, and that's simply not worth the effort. And speaking of not worth the effort, what we see at the moment is that the trend for software in the loop reaches exactly these areas where creating virtual ECUs was not seen as beneficial due to economic reasons in the past, just because the effort of virtualization, at least that was the impression, outweighs the benefits of executing software virtually. But at least our understanding is this is becoming more and more a trend in terms of SDV. We want to have better software-hardware extraction. We want to do more virtual tests in system integration level. We have to do that. So I think this trend is definitely on the rise.
This is also why we would like to highlight these two beneficial points. So on the one hand and on the one side, we see OEMs that are trying to shift everything left to say, okay, we would like to validate even earlier and even in an earlier stage. This would be the extrinsic motivation for the suppliers because they have to adapt to this. They have to migrate into fulfilling this requirement from the OEM. And on the other hand, we had the example of the tier one who were struggling to meet the expectations on the hardware in the loop side. So software in the loop also brings the benefit to front load even from existing validation processes, etc., and to avoid coming into pressure on the hardware in the loop benches. So any test that you can already run in a software in the loop environment will be lent down and took from these resources and capacities from hardware in the loop benches. And these are the two main benefits when it comes to why software in the loop matters also for tier ones. And we would like to say, okay, it's not only about having everything in place earlier, but also being able to validate and test even more frequent. When I'm talking to customers in China, for example, we might say, and we often get the feeling that the software releases, the software versions, etc., they are updating it rather frequently and even faster than we are used to it. And on the hardware in the loop side, when we're talking about real ECUs, it's rather complicated and rather not feasible at all to meet those kind of frequencies. So with software in the loop in the right manner, we are able to meet those kind of frequency from the software versions and to being able to validate it already in the software in the loop environment.
Yeah. Also an important point that one part of why everybody's talking about China speed is exactly this virtualization and software first approach, right? So as you just mentioned, these are the different benefits that you get. And we already mentioned earlier, this is currently in a phase where things are shaping. We see that customers who are starting with that have so many different questions from a technical point of view. How do I deal with SPI interfaces? How do I deal with hardware periphery, end-to-end protection? Also, how do I create the virtual ECU? How can I simulate it properly? What kind of bus simulation do I need? And also on a strategic level, what tests can I actually execute in the software in the loop phase that are also, for example, accepted by an assessor when it comes to functional safety? And how can I embed this in a test process? And that is why, shortly speaking, we are approaching customers directly. We are collaborating them. We are providing them support on all these levels, independently on these specific requests. And that is also the reason why we, for example, have business development and customer success management available.
Exactly. One thing I would like to highlight and to mention what you were already saying is that we are talking here about something that is a little bit different to hardware in the loop testing. And dSPACE is very, very famous for the hardware in the loop test benches, but it's not that you will just get a software in the loop platform from us and then you're ready to go. Software in the loop is a little bit more rather complicated and a little bit more complex, so you need a little bit more effort and also invest from your own side. So not only from timing, but also from having a little bit more patience to see, okay, we have to invest here now. We have to do a kind of an investment to set something up, but you will see the benefit rather fast on the longer term. So everything that you would like to see within software in the loop in the first beginning when you are starting with it, it will not appear magically from one day to another. But software in the loop is a rather big investment also for the future. So anything that you might set up in the very days, and you already told that we were able to support in any cases for software in the loop testing, speaking from function development or even a single ECU integration, up to whole vehicle systems where we were just placing the software in the loop environment around this. All of these projects we were supporting for the last few years, and we are seeing much benefits and much something getting out of this. And all of these are very much our aspects and our goals that we see from day to day.
Yeah, that is also the important aspect, to have a quick benefit, right? Everybody is already under pressure with the increasing development cycles, and how do you find time to apply something on top? By proving that it can help you in the long run. So I think, Erik, that's basically it for now. So I hope for you we could give you some insights on how we see the market is developing, why software in the loop is more and more becoming a topic also for tier 1 suppliers in any domains, and how we are approaching the challenges with you together. So thank you for listening today.
Also, thank you from my side. If you are interested in having some kind of more further discussions to have a really deep dive into such kind of topics, let us know. We are looking forward to your response, and see you next time.
dSPACE, your partner in simulation and validation.